Good, good, yes, yes, good. Hello, hello, hello. Sorry about that little pop there. All right. Anna Pavlovna, Chapter 2. Anna Pavlovna's drawing room was steadily filling up. All the important people in St. Petersburg society were there, varying enormously in age and character, for all their shared social background. Prince Vasily's daughter, the beautiful Helena, had just arrived to take him on to the ambassador's reception. She was wearing a ball gown enhanced by a maid of honor's monogram. The young Princess Bolkonskaya, a slip of a girl, known as the most seductive woman in Petersburg, was there too. Married the previous winter, she no longer appeared at large occasions because she was pregnant. But she did still attend small soirees. Got it in the end. Prince Vasily's son, Prince Hippolyte, Hip, Hip, Hippolyte, arrived with Mortemart, and introduced him. Also present was Abby Moreo, and many other people. Anna Pavlovna was welcoming her guests as they arrived with a "Have you met my aunt?" or "I don't think you know my aunt," before steering them with a great solemnity towards a little old lady with big bows in her hair, who had come sailing in from the next room as soon as the guests had begun to arrive. Anna Pavlovna would announce them by name, slowly transferring her gaze from guest to aunt, and then move on. All the guests went through the motions of greeting this aunt, who was unknown, uninteresting, and unneeded by anyone. Anna Pavlovna observed their greetings with sadness and solemn sympathy, a picture of silent approval. The lady known as my aunt spoke in the same way to every new arrival, commenting on their health, her own health, and the health of Her Majesty, who was by now, thank God, feeling better. All those who approached were polite enough to refrain from showing undue haste, but once this onerous duty had been fulfilled, they walked away from the old lady with a sense of relief, and never went near her again all evening. Young Princess Bolkonskaya had brought some work with her in a gold-embroidered velvet bag. Her pretty young upper lip, slightly shadowed with down, barely covered her teeth. But that made it all the prettier when it rose up, and lovelier still when it curled down to meet her lower lip. As tends to happen with the best-looking woman, a defect, in this case a short lip and a half-open mouth, came out as a distinctive and beautiful feature. Everyone enjoyed the sight of this pretty little mother to be, brimming with health and vitality, and making light of her condition. After a few minutes in her company and the exchange of a word or two, old men and bored, morose young men felt as if they themselves were becoming like her. Anyone who talked to her, watching her as every word she spoke revealed that bright little smile and the constant gleam of those gazing white teeth, walked away feeling full of bonhomie. Bonhomie. Everybody did. Everybody did. The little princess waddled slightly as she tripped rapidly around the table, holding her tiny work bag. Then she cheerfully smoothed down her dress and sat on the sofa near the silver samovar. Everything she did seemed like a treat for herself and everyone around her. "I brought my work," she said in French, opening her reticule and addressing all the company. "But listen, Annette, you must stop playing tricks on me," she said, turning to the hostess. "You wrote and said it was only a little party. Just look at what I've got on." And she spread her arm wide to display an elegant grey dress, decorated with lace and set off by a broad sash just below the bosom. "Don't worry, Lise. You'll always be the prettiest," answered Anna Pavlovna. "Did you know my husband is deserting me?" she said to a general, continuing to speak in French and using just the same tone. "He's going off to get himself killed. Do tell me what this awful war is all about," she asked of Prince Vasily, but before he could answer her, had moved on to his daughter, the beautiful Helena. "Helena? Isn't she a gorgeous creature, this little princess?" said Prince Vasily to Anna Pavlovna. Shortly after the little princess' arrival, sorry, there's supposed to be a pause there, and okay, right. Shortly after the little princess's arrival, walked in a big, generously portioned young man with closed cropped hair and spectacles, wearing the last word in light-colored breeches and a tanned coat with a jabot. A jabot. This stout young man was the illegitimate son of a celebrated grande from Catherine's age, old Count Bezunkov, who was now on his deathbed in Moscow. He had not yet entered any branch of service, having only just returned from abroad, where he had been completing his education. This was the first appearance in society. Anna Pavlovna welcomed him with the kind of bow she reserved for the lowest person in the hierarchy of her drawing room. But even as she bestowed her meanest welcome on this new arrival, Anna Pavlovna's face was transformed. She looked ill at ease and full of alarm, like someone who had come across some gross object, oversized and out of place. By the small margin, Pierre was indeed the largest man in the room, but her look of dismay must surely have derived from this man's special look, intelligent, rather diffident. 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 Diffidente. Diffident. Modest or shy. Lack of self-confidence. Okay. Rather diffident. But also piercing and spontaneous. That made him a distinctive figure in the drawing room. It is most kind of you, Monsieur Pierre, to come to see a poor sick woman, said Anna Pavlovna, looking anxious across at her aunt as she steered him in her direction. Pierre mumbled something unintelligible, and continued to stare around the room, looking for something. He beamed with pleasure, bowed to the little princess, as if she was a close friend of his, and then went over to the aunt. Anna Pavlovna's worst fear were confirmed when Pierre walked off without hearing the full story of Her Majesty's health. Rattled, Anna Pavlovna detained him with a question. You don't know the Abbe Morio, do you? Such an interesting man. Yes, I've heard about him and his scheme of everlasting peace. All very interesting, but not really feasible. Don't you think so? Asked Anna Pavlovna, for the sake of saying something before getting back to her duties as hostess. But Pierre now committed the opposite kind of Forkspace. An embarrassing or tactless act. But Pierre now committed the opposite kind of Forkspace. Fresh from walking away without listening properly to a lady who was speaking to him, he now talked on and detained a lady who needed to get away from him. With his head lowered and his great legs thrusted wide apart, he set about explaining to Anna Pavlovna why he thought Abby's scheme was a silly fancy. Could we talk about this later on? Smiled Anna Pavlovna, detaching herself from this young man who had no idea how to conduct himself. She resumed her duties as a hostess, watching and listening carefully, ready to render assistance at any point where the conversation was beginning to flag. Just as the foreman of a spinning mill settles at the workers down and then strolls about the place on the lookout for a breakdown or any funny noise from a spindle, the slightest squeak or knock that would bring him rushing over to ease the machinery or make an adjustment. So Anna Pavlovna patrolled her drawing room, walking over any group where the talk was too little or too loud, and easing the machinery of the conversation back into its proper steady hum, with a single word here or a tiny maneuver there. But busy as she was with all these preoccupations, she was still clearly worried about Pierre. She watched him anxiously as he went as she went over to hear what was being said in Mortimer's circle, and then set off for a different group where the abbey was holding forth. Pierre had been educated abroad. Oh God, I keep forgetting to pause forth. Pierre had been educated abroad, and this evening's party at Anna Pavlovna's was his first such occasion in Russia. Knowing that all the intelligentsia of Petersburg was gathered here, he was like a child in a toy shop. His eyes darted about everywhere. He was afraid of missing any intellectual talk that might have been his to hear. As he gazed at the assembled company, their faces pictured of refinement and self-confidence, he was expecting to hear something very clever at any moment. Eventually, he came over to Morio. The conversation struck him as interesting, so he stood there, waiting for a chance to launch forth with his own ideas, as young people are wont to do. As young people are wont to do. And there you go. Chapter 2.